But yes, welcome. This is lesson 1 of Doodle with Della. I've started it's a new doodling challenge, and it started on Monday. So some of you have seen this doodle grid already, so this has been available on my website since Monday. And today I'm just going to give you some beginners tips on how to doodle, and each week we'll revisit what the worksheet is each week, and I'll build on some ideas and techniques that we'll use. So yes, I'm going to start quite simply today. So if you're an absolute beginner, this is perfect. And if you're already tried some doodling before, hopefully as the weeks progress, you'll see you can really push yourself in developing new doodles. And I'm also going to be starting a piece of artwork alongside this as well. So it's my biggest yet. So I'll be starting at the end of this lesson. I'll be adding some of your doodles onto my new piece of artwork, which is 12 by 12 inches. So it's the biggest doodle I've done. So depending on how long the lockdown lasts, we'll see how far I get with completing it. But I've already picked out the frame from IKEA that I want to use to frame it and put it on my wall when it's finished. So I've got aspirations. And hi Sarah, and hello from Holly. Hello Sarah and Holly, thanks for joining. I hope wonderful. Oh, who have we got? Oh, and I've got we've got Lou May and Sarah. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining along. If you want to doodle along with me, make sure you've got a pen and some paper. So on the topic of pens, these are my favourite, but you don't have to doodle with these. Any biro or pen will do, especially if you're just testing out doodles. But these ones, if you want to know, these are called, let me get that in focus, they're Unipin, and there's a fab website called Tiger Pens, which is still delivering at the moment. They've got lots of stationery available to order online. So yeah, these are Unipins, and they come in, you see this number here, so that's the thickness of the nib. Oh, so I think it's 0. To the eye you can't see them at all. When you draw them on a piece of paper, you can see the slight difference. So they come in a pack ranging. This pack ranges from 0.1 to 0.8. So the fine bits, I'll use the thin pens, and if you're filling in sections, colouring in bits, it's nice to step up to a larger one, so you're not spending too long colouring in little patches. So that's the pens we're using. We quite often use black. I say if you're just doodling, then if you're learning doodles, then any colour biro, blue biro would do. But the black and the white really makes a strong contrast, especially when you're doing a big piece of doodle work. So that's why we generally use black. So yes, but we're just going to start with pens and pencil. We've got other bits and pieces and things I'll add in, some shaders and pencils and framing and things like that later on throughout the lessons. But we're just going to start with the pen and paper. That's all we need today. I've got a glass of water with me in case I get dry mouth, but yeah, if you want to grab a beverage, a cup of tea, then please do. Right, so I'm going to start off so I always use 0.2 is always my starting point for these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to doodle each of these. These are quite simple doodles. I know most of you will be able to doodle them from sight, but I'm going to run through some tips. So we'll start off with the spiral. So the trick with spiral, a lot of circular ones, is to be confident and go for it. And don't take your pen off the paper, because trying to rejoin a spiral is really difficult and generally ends up quite messy. And also, as the same is the case, if you want to do some doodles, you would start with pencil, just to give yourself a grid and a structure to work on. But mainly, especially for this one, it's best to go straight to pen, because it's more difficult to draw a pen line over a pencil line for anything like a spiral. So we'll start at the centre, okay, and then loop round and just try and keep the distance. If you end up going bigger like this, it doesn't matter. You can expand it and make it bigger, or you can keep it tight and try and keep the same distance all the way around. If you're happy to go with the flow, then it doesn't matter which way you go. And to be fair, normally when you're doodling you're doodling quite small areas, so doing such a big doodle is quite unusual, and it is quite daunting to draw the spiral going that big. So starting off in the middle, and my battery's just flashed up on the iPad. That could be a problem. I do have a charger here. Let me just work this out. It's in a. Let me connect this up, so I don't want to lose you. I think it's draining the battery quicker, so I have to just move the camera slightly so I can get the charger in. Right. Okay, we're back. It's a bit precarious now because the charger's means it doesn't fit in the frame. There we go. Now you can tell it's live. And okay, so that's the spiral. Now next, the bubbles. Now the bubbles, the way I start the bubbles is by doing the large bubbles first. So using the 0.2, I will draw a line of largish circles. Not too bothered about how neat it is, they all kind of get lost in it, and then leaving a gap and then drawing the next line of large circles, and I'll do one more. So these don't have to be in stripes, you could have them going off in waves or circles, but yes, I start with the large circles, and then alongside each of these I start drawing smaller circles, and I aim to have the circle touching the line before, but it's smaller circles, so I do one line across and then another line, and repeat that for all of these. Okay. Now what I will do at this point is switch to a thinner pen and then draw another line of circles, pretty much the same size as the ones before, depending on how much space there is. But the thinner pen line, it's subtle, but the thinner pen line just gives it that feeling of fading away. And then in the middle of that, I'm going to fill this little bit with tiny circles. And sometimes you might find that there's no space to put the tiny circles. Depends how close they are together. So it gives you that sense of, so the bigger the circles are at the start and how it fades in, gives you that kind of undulation effect of shading. For you. Wonderful. And then next we're going to do is this, I can't say there's a cheesecloth, I think it's been called this one before. This one's a bit similar. I'm going to go back to the 0.2. Right, so I'm going to try just drawing a line with just a slight curve in it, and then I'm just going to keep the same distance apart and just try and sort of follow the undulations if you want it quite uniform, or you can make a different curve every time and make your own loops and bumps. And a nice trick is to, especially for this where you want the same pattern both ways, is to rotate the paper, because your hands already got used to drawing in a certain way, so you might as well take advantage of that and just tell your hand to do the same thing but the other way, and that becomes quite a relaxing, repetitive motion. So this one, depending on what you want to do, but you can keep them quite large. Like this one, I'm quite tempted to go into the squares and add detail and doodles into the squares themselves. Or you can actually do it quite tight together and just sort of do wiggly lines. So yeah, I'm doing it quite tight. And the so as opposed to doing a straight, I mean you can obviously you can, if you can keep straight lines, you can do it. You can hash it with straight lines. The wavy lines give it an impression of movement, and you kind of feel like you're undulating across. And it also just covers any, if you've got an unsteady hand, it's a great way of making it look like that's what it was meant to be like. So it's a nice one to hide that. Just notice how out of focus is it. Just going to check that you're still able to see. I'll take a photograph of the this sheet at the end. Now for the stripes next, the big bold stripes. So this one I recommend to start off by drawing a series of straight lines. Okay, and then what we're going to do is colour in each alternate one. And now a good trick for this is just to mark, even if you're working on a scrap piece of paper, you could even mark in the margin. Even so, you are you're colouring it in with black pen, it doesn't matter. So it's to mark each one that's going to be coloured in. So rather than just start colouring, it's best to look at the thing as a whole and just mark on it which ones you're going to be colouring in, because once you've lost in the moment, it's so easy to start colouring in the section that should be white or the section that should be that. So because I've done this quite large, so normally if this is a smaller scale I would use the 0.8 and fill it in, but because I've done this quite large, I'm actually going to switch to a Sharpie, black Sharpie. So it's a lovely rich black, but it does work differently. It will go through the potentially what paper you're using or what card, so you have to be careful that you're not damaging something underneath. So actually I'm going to switch straight to that, and I'm just going to put this underneath just in case. It's quite a thick card, but just in case. And you can fill this in quite quickly. So don't worry about colouring in the lines, because you can make your own line. So you know where you want to go and you can just draw on it. And as long as you're doing it in one motion, you're going to get a nice crisp line. And then colour in that bit. underneath. In the back. So again, if you're doing this on a smaller scale, then you probably want to just use the normal fine line as a thick fine line to fill in the dark squares, or you could do it with shading instead. So the thing I do, if you just did like a hash line all the way across, you'd get that similar feeling of the dark and light shade. Okay. And I have to say, after doing some time with little doodles like this, it feels quite nice to just sort of like, it's like stretching your hand muscles to go, just colour it in. That works well. Wonderful. Okay, so they are the 4 doodles that are on this week's worksheet. So the idea of the worksheet, if you haven't completed this one already, and there'll be a new one on Monday, is to fill in these 4 squares and to take the doodles from the top and from the left and merge them into one in the middle. And then for this square, you would take the bubbles and the hashtag, and then this one, take the spiral and the stripes into here, and the bubbles and the stripes into there. Tough one, that one, because I would say that's already got an element of stripes in it already. But yes, it's been lovely to see your what doodles you've come up with on these. So let me just show you. So what I find is that once I've seen other people's doodles, it's difficult to then think of your own unique ones. So I'm going to do one here, but I'm trying to wrap my brains. I'm pretty sure it's going to be one that's already on a sheet that's been submitted. So apologies. Take it as flattery and not imitation. So I'm going to add some quite large patterns to here. And do and then I'm going to add spiral. So another thing, so if you're doing a spiral in a small space like that, so you can spiral out until the first point of it hits the outside, and then sort of use your mind's eye to imagine where the spiral would come back in, and just add the circle as if it was continuing beyond the square. In the middle. What I'm going to try and do, so I'm going to do a checkerboard with these ones, and then I don't actually know how well this will work, but that's the joy of doodling, is that you're making your own rules. Is I'm going to try and do the spiral in the opposite direction in the other checkerboard, and see whether visually that has an impact, but if not, it will just look like a grid of spirals. Which will still look cool. I'm reserving judgment until I hold it up to see whether you can see that, whether you can see a difference or not. No, I think it's too subtle. But yeah, I like it anyway. There's a lot of spirals. So yeah, so that's the idea. So you can play around with the scale. You can make one smaller, bigger. You can overlay them. You can merge one into the other. It really is your choice to experiment and discover some new doodles along the way. And you have come up with some great ideas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the piece of artwork that I'm creating. So I've drawn it out in pencil, but I haven't put any pen to paper yet. Right, let me see if you can see that. Hold it in the right place. Okay, so slightly too big to go on here, might have to set these up. So you've got a lady's face here with quite a stylised eye, an amazing brow. I think that's the only brow art I've ever done. I've never attempted anything on myself. And then lots of wavy locks of hair. So what I've done is I've sketched out in pencil. I might change a few bits. I'm still unsure. But basically so the way I'm going to build up the doodle is every section is going to be a different doodle. Okay, so I'm going to pick out sections. Some end up being really small, others end up being quite large. So I'm going to pick out a section to add in a doodle, and that's going to be all the hair, every bit of it. And then I'm going to leave the face white with just the details on the features. So yes, and I'm going to use some of your, I think what we'll do, might start off with one of these as a little warm up for me to add in. Just for us to say, I think the hardest bit about doing a piece of artwork like this is the first. Is the first section. So let's pick out. I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do this one with the ziggy-zaggy grid. Okay, and I'm going to rotate it to get the lines going the other way. Beautiful. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at some of your submissions. I want to use a couple of the ones you've put on. So I've put there's a post on my Facebook page which is called Finish Grids. Where is it? When did I put it up? On Tuesday? Here we go. Oh, so completed grids, week 1. And you'll see in the comments on there's people have uploaded images. So actually I'm going to start with Sarah's, which I'm calling the Beetlejuice. I want to view how well you can see this. So I'm going to start with Sarah's Beetlejuice spiral. So let's pick a slightly bigger bit so we get this. About this one here. Okay. So I'm going to start with a spiral. So again, just taking the spiral out to the edges. And then I'm going to start colouring in sections. I might switch to a thicker pen. And I'll see how much done. So it's nice to have the black sections not meeting the one in the middle, isn't it? So I'm going to do one here just because it looks a bit unbalanced. But once you've got a big spiral, it kind of works like a brick pattern, like you're aiming for the black bit to be in between two other black bits on the inner spiral, if that makes sense. You can still see that. I think what I'll do each week is I'll add a couple of doodles to this during this live lesson, but I'm also going to set this up with some time-lapse video and do a few more sections so you can see it appear. Nothing, so work out where else I can put the sections. One here and one here. Here. I think that's the edge of that section there, so it's a bit tricky. Yes. So wonderful. There we go. Let me just hold that up so you can see. There we go. First two doodles on the worksheet. Wonderful. I'll keep working on that for next week. But yes, thank you very much for joining along live. If you've had a little practice, test out these doodles and then fill in the grid, and then the next grid will be available on Monday at 9 o'clock, and it will have 4 new doodles for you to have a play with and work around, and then next Saturday at 8 o'clock, well, I'll be asleep at 8 o'clock. Next Saturday at midday, I'll be back here again with lesson 2. Yes, thank you very much for joining me, and have